Welcome to Microsoft Dynamics CRM 2013 Customization New Features. My name is Ishita Kunwar and I will be presenting this session on business rules. In CRM 2011, most of the client business logic is expressed using JavaScript and events attached to HTML elements via the client API. For the CRM 2013 client experience, we have also now provided a way to express business logic to determine simple checks for validity of data, visibility of content, and formatting. Business rules are designed to allow you as a user without significant programming experience to be able to create some client-side scripting and logic that you can run on your entity forms. The business rule editor allows you to create and modify these business rules via the UI. Business rules consist of a collection of conditions and actions that can be used to enforce simple business logic for any organization. They are bound by the client SDK API. And this also helps reduce unsupported customizations. Additionally, they are built on top of the workflow infrastructure in CRM. They consist of conditions, and conditions would typically contain a field, an operator, and an operand that make up a logical statement that can evaluate to either true or false. If all the conditions of a rule evaluate to true, then in that particular case, the actions are executed. What you see in this diagram here is the business rule editor, which can be used by a business analyst who can model their simple logic, and a developer may also have some input in it. So the end result would be some business rules that can be applied to the forms. And after the fact, when the business rule has been created and also activated, there is some XAML generated by the platform under the covers, and based off of the XAML, JavaScript, which is essentially just built off of the CRM client SDK, is generated and utilized. So what this also enables us to do is render these business rule enforced logic. What this also enables us to do is enforce business logic on multiple types of clients. For example, not only our web forms on the browser experience and the Outlook client experience, but also now on devices and the CRM for tablets experience in CRM 2013. I also want to walk you through 4 different entry points in the application that can be used to enter the business rule editor and start defining some of these business rules in the web client experience. Let's go ahead and select our customization editor. So from this view, we can navigate to any particular entity, and when we do so, we can see that business rules is available now as an option at the entity level. So if we select business rules, what you will see is now you can come in here and essentially create a business rule. So if you start creating business rules from this entry point, this would default to a scope of all forms for your entity. So in this case, for the account entity. Some other entry points that you can use to start defining business rules is, for example, if we click on Forms, and let's go ahead and select a particular form. So on selection of a particular form, now we see business rules available as an option inside the form editor. So if you were to select business rules from up here, this essentially populates a business rules explorer on the right where you can start defining new business rules. So any business rules that you define from this entry point would be specific to the particular form that you're on. Other entry points for defining the business rules would be, for example, if we were to click into any particular attribute, such as account name, you will see that now there is a tab for business rules. So you can also start specifying business rules by landing into specific field properties and creating the business rules off of this entry point. And finally, the last entry point I can show you is if we close out of the form and actually navigate into the field level. At this point, we can select a particular attribute. Let's go ahead and select, for example, let's go ahead and select an address attribute, such as address1_country. When you do so, notice that per field level, you also have, besides the information tab, now an option to start creating business rules from inside the specific field. So these are the 4 specific entry points that you can easily start specifying business rules for in your web client experience. Some other points to keep in mind are that business rules are solution aware in CRM 2013, so you can import and export them with the entities that they're associated to. Also, they can run on different type of clients, as I discussed. So not only can they run on the web client for browsers, but also for the Outlook client in an online and offline experience. Similarly, they can run on iPads, and they can also run on the CRM for tablets experience. They are, however, customizable only via the web client or the Outlook client, specifically when it is in connected mode or online mode. Now we're going to quickly discuss a diagram discussing the architecture for business rules. The object model for workflows ends up being manipulated whenever we create a workflow which occurs on the server side. We have now enabled this object model to also be editable on the client side for the business rules. So the user action would end up modifying the tree that represents the workflow or the business rule. When we actually go ahead and save the business rule, the tree gets serialized and sent across the wire to the server. XAML is used as the storage mechanism. So what happens is that XAML gets generated and then the object model gets serialized to XAML. This XAML would then get executed by the workflow foundation. So today workflows also have triggers on specific SDK messages. In the case for business rules, there will be triggers now for the business rules that are going to be events for the form, such as onload, onchange, and onsave trigger types. And these will be supported from the client API. And the form tree will be walked to activate the event handlers. So the workflow table with different categories will now start storing the XAML along with the new table for storing the triggers for the rules. So every time you go ahead and activate a business rule, there will be a walk of the tree to generate some actual JavaScript which needs to be run on the form. For each rule, there will be output JavaScript that can then get written out to the database. Only activated rules would actually get hooked up to the specific forms, and some SDK messages internally will be responsible for aggregating these rules to particular forms. So when it's time to determine which business rules need to be executed, we will call into the SDK messages and query the trigger tables, where everything And also note that everything is written in JavaScript for execution, so there is no transformation that needs to be done at that time. Summary of how the architecture works. Basically, refactor the workflow object model. The workflow object model is being reused on the client side. Business rules being just a new category of workflows that have been introduced under the hood. XAML constructs are still being utilized, and JavaScript is actually getting generated and written out to the CRM database. So, business rules in CRM 2013 are essentially just a simple interface to implement some business logic at an attribute level or a field level for specific forms for entities. It is not a complete replacement for complex business logic that is being implemented via JavaScript in CRM today. And the mantra again behind implementing business rules is that they can be written once on the web client, for example, and then they can be rendered everywhere, meaning on different type of clients as we discussed. So the same business logic definition, once defined, can render now on different client experiences and devices. As far as the business rule editor is concerned, so as we mentioned, it's essentially a combination of specifying conditions and actions. There are 5 different types of actions that you can specify for business rules today. So you can either show error messages, you can set specific field values, you can set the business required state for attributes, set visibility for fields, or lock, unlock fields. So there is a summary of the action types now on this slide. And for any other type of actions that you may want to do, we would still recommend using JavaScript web resources. So in summary, business rules will execute on multiple types of client experiences. They can be set to a scope of a single form or all forms for any entity. So on a per entity basis, they are defined. They are built to be solution aware, and because XAML is being used to generate the JavaScript, there is SDK support via the Workflow API for CRM 2013. So before we jump into a demo for business rules, I want to also reiterate some points in regards to the scope of business rule functionality. So business rules in CRM 2013 cannot be run across different entities, meaning that they have to be entity specific, and they can only execute as long as the fields that they are applicable to are actually displayed on the form. So what that means is that if the field is not present on the particular form, then in that case the business rule will not run silently. It will not trigger error, but it will simply not execute. So when we say that new form types like quick create forms also support business rules, what this means is that if the quick create form, being a shortcut form with fewer attributes than the full experience, lacks some of the attributes that are tied to your business rules, you may find that when entering data via the quick create experience, your business rules are not getting triggered. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, the very first time when you start creating business rules, they're always created in a deactivated or a draft state, and they must be activated to actually start executing, which is similar to kind of how the workflow infrastructure works today in CRM. Additionally, if you have multiple business rules for a control, the rules will always run in the order that they were added into the system, so your last modified business rule runs last. A new security privilege has been introduced to activate business rules. I will walk you through how you can configure that privilege for any specific users. Also, if there are multiple solutions introduced into the system, business rules will be run in the order in which the solutions were imported. So the last install solutions rules will run last. Also, in this current release, there are no limits on the number of actions that you can actually start attaching to the business rules. So even though the functionality for business rules is very limited in this release in the types of actions you can implement, there is no limit that we are enforcing from a platform perspective as to how many actions you can actually attach to the business rule. Also, you cannot call any other existing JavaScript web resources in the system via the business rule editor. So this is not something possible in the current release, but it may be something that we could look at in the product roadmap. Also, you cannot connect to external data sources at this point. Let's go ahead and jump into a demo so we can walk through how you can configure business rules in CRM 2013 and go over a few other nuances.